Welcome to Getting Real with the Spiritual. This is a show that's co hosted by myself, Jennifer Regular, the Soul Illuminator at Lighting the Path, and Monica Henderson of MinkLife Motivation. And we have our special guest today, Josette Diaz. And this is where we get to have just a conversation. We just get real with the spiritual. We're going to pick a topic out of the fishbowl. We have all kinds of topics swirling around in there. Monica's going to grab one and we're just going to talk about it. We're going to have a conversation. There's no like teaching guru style jargon, any of those things going on here. It's just real conversation. We talk about our practices, what's challenging us, what's not. We just get into how we live day to day and learn about and discover new ideas, new concepts that can really help us keep our spirit intact, make us resilient, give us that power for liberation, and just have fun. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to hand over the mic to Monica.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So our topic for the day is enlightenment.
Whew, all right.
Uh, so the rules of the game here is because none of us actually knew that until that very second I just said it. So I'm going to just give us a second to kind of like ground in that concept of enlightenment, right? And give us a second to feel what comes up, right? So we are being divinely guided to talk about enlightenment and what that means to us. And so I guess the first question we have for us as a group is enlightenment something that is a part of your spiritual practice? And so, Josette, I'm going to have you answer that question first. Is enlightenment a part of your spiritual practice?
I think that's a really good question because when you first said enlightenment, I thought, oh, wow, that's so vast. And then I start thinking, what does that really mean? Because it's such a big word. And then it really boils down to like self-awareness, right? So I would say absolutely, because that's kind of the sweet spot of the work that I do is around self-awareness. And I'm constantly working on I feel off today. So why am I off? Is that part of my core wound? Where is it coming from? What's it about? Because it can get in your way in all kinds of different areas. And so, yeah, I would say self-awareness is the big piece to enlightenment.
Nice. See how like naturally that just came out?
You're enlightened.
Jennifer, what about you? Is enlightenment a part of your spiritual practice?
It's a part of the way I see wellness, actually. My previous business practices was called Enlightened Wellness, and it was really about that spiritual self care. But when you said enlightenment, the first thing that came to me actually was a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh saying that enlightenment is when the wave realizes it's the ocean. You're like, oh, I remember that quote. Well, what does it really mean? And I think it's just that knowing that we're part of something bigger than us. And though we might seem separate and be doing our own thing and moving in our own rhythm, that it's actually part of a bigger consciousness. And the enlightenment, I think, is being encompassed in all of that, embedded in like this larger divine intelligence in some way, and just being held in that. And so when I think of enlightenment for myself and in my own practices, it's being in that, being in this feeling of lightness, of joy, of peace. And I find that most often either under my weighted blanket or out in the forest or in like a guided meditation that's just a time of stillness even, but then also in movement. So there's lots of different ways that I find that, but it's all about becoming lighter and freer, I find.
Yeah, enlightenment. Right. So when I first met the word enlightenment, it was through my kind of my questioning era, right, in my early 20s. So I grew up like super religious and like very conservative Christian, right? And so enlightenment was not a part of any kind of spiritual conversation that we were having. And it wasn't until I decided I was going to walk I was going to research kind of what my soul's language was, because I didn't feel like my soul's language was the one that I was born into, right? I didn't feel like Christianity was speaking directly to my soul the way it spoke to others. And so the first time I ran across it was in when I was reading about Buddhism, and I was a poor, broke college student at the time. So I was like sitting on the floor of the Borders bookstore, like, I'm just going to read everything in this section. I can't afford any of these books. I'm going to read them and put them back on the shelf and,
Oh, wow.
and go my route that way. And that was the first time that I heard of it. And I was like, oh, well, that's a concept. And at the time, it felt so like a destination, right? Like enlightenment is a destination. It's somewhere you're going to arrive one day. And now I view it as something that I drive myself to arrive to daily, right? But it's not at all about understanding anybody else but me.
Yeah.
No one else but me. Nothing else in the world but me. And that my job is to be the most in tuned with what's happening with me in my mind, in my body, and in my emotional state of being. And so enlightenment is today what it looks like in my spiritual practice is it looks like, who has Monica unfolded into today? Like what part of the journey have I unfolded into in this very moment in my life? Who have I become through the journey at this moment? What do I need to um, kind of reflect on? What do I need to be in that moment? And so it's not a place that I'm trying to go. It's an existence of where I am in the moment and reminding myself to be there on a regular basis.
I
So
think that's the trick.
right.
Remind yourself to be there in the moment. Like,
Yeah.
it's so easy to get swooped up in other things.
Yeah. I just came off of a vacation in Maui where I literally had nothing to do but to reflect. To reflect on what's unfolding with me. And that was the biggest part that I had like kind of came away with. Like when they all fell away, ultimately my job is to know me the best I could possibly know me. The only other person who's on this journey with me, right, is this one.
Right.
Yeah. So that's enlightenment for me. What is
Yeah,
that? So now that we've heard each other's understanding of enlightenment, what is that? How does that enrich your experience now moving forward with this concept of enlightenment?
makes me think of those light bulb moments, the ahas and the sudden enlightenment, right? Like something lit up and then literally like the light bulb shows up, if you're watching a cartoon, it's like that's enlightenment, the light bulb just went off, the light just went on. And yeah, it's that awareness, like you're saying, that consciousness and the becoming, and suddenly everything makes sense.
Mhm.
At least for a moment, in that moment of awareness,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
might find something else where this doesn't make sense anymore. I don't get it. And then we become a deeper understanding. But it made me think of those light bulb moments where things just suddenly make sense and the light goes on. It's like, oh, and that's can be enlightenment too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that.
I like that too. When I was listening to both of you give your explanations, the big thing that stood out that you both kind of said in different ways was a sense of being. And that is something that kind of rings true for me right now, like where I'm at in my process, because I've been going through, some things in my process that haven't felt comfortable and fun. And I was on such a high, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh. And so that's it's actually a celebration and a good place to be. And what you both said reminded me of like part of awareness and part of enlightenment is just experiencing that beingness of ourselves, like what you were saying, Monica, on vacation, and just really kind of sinking in the ocean. Like, oh, I love that analogy and reference for enlightenment and the oneness, because just being with yourself and kind of recognizing where you are and just having that grace for where you are and getting still and kind of quiet and maybe not doing as much as you normally would do allows you so much more expansiveness when you kind of move through whatever you're moving through. At least that's how it's worked for me. So that's what it reminded me of. I just thought, oh, yeah, I just need to be.
Yeah. What I love when you were describing what that meant to you is you said celebration, and
Mm.
the last conversation we had was the random part was about celebration, and I love that they tie, like, these conversations are
Yeah.
tying to each other. I feel like
Nice.
it's like divine placement of these conversations, right?
Right.
Um, but yeah, it we always want to move through. We always want to hurry up and get through this part
Yeah.
that's not fun, right? Like,
Yeah.
this isn't fun. Let me hurry up and get out of this.
I don't want to feel like this.
To the party. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And but there's always a reason, I guess, a reason for the season. Right? And like,
Mhm.
there's something to be learned in that space. And even though we would love for enlightenment, right? That experience of enlightenment to always feel cozy and comfy and like
Yeah.
joyful and like, oh yes, I'm enlightened, like a Disney princess with little birds chirping around us, like, I'm enlightened, this is how I live, right? But sometimes it does look like a bit of a dark night of the soul, or it does look like just a really quiet, somber place as well. And if we're always in fear of being quiet, of being with whatever feelings are happening there, then we're actually missing the whole point, I think. And so I'm glad that you are mentioning having this part of your journey be not fun in your words.
Not so
Mhm.
fun.
Yeah, but it does. I mean, if we're honest, good stuff really just feeds the ego, right? But it's
Yeah.
the stuff where the work is done.
Hmm.
So it's a part of the cycle of enlightenment, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. That's so true. You kind of need it in order to like know how to celebrate it.
Yeah,
Right?
so good, so good. It's these conversations are funny to me, how they unfold. The person who's sitting here is always the person who needed to talk about that particular word. That was
Yeah.
funny. So,
Magic.
is there anything else about enlightenment that you want to share, or about your journey right now, Josette, in
Hmm.
kind of this space that you're in?
I think it just gets down to quieting the noise that's around you. You know, it's so easy to get caught up in what everybody's doing because we're so into our, I mean, most people are into their social media in some way, whatever that is for you, whether it's TikTok or, many a mornings on a weekend have been wasted going through TikTok for fun. And so, I think that like when I start to saturate myself too much with what everybody else is doing and what direction they're in, that it gets so big, it kind of consumes me.
Mhm.
And when I feel like that, then I start overthinking about where I am and what I, should be doing. And
Mm.
so I have to take steps back and be conscious of that before it really starts to overtake me. And I find myself kind of in this hole where I have a variety of thought worms kind of taking me in different places. So I've really learned to like recognize that when I'm getting too inundated or I'm thinking too much about everybody else, that that's my signal that it's time to go inward.
Mhm.
And I can feel it because I feel that resistance. And when you start recognizing what that is for yourself, what it feels like in your body, and when you're out of rhythm, you're out of flow, and that kind of vacillates in between, right? that it just sort of like tells you, it guides you where you need to be. And if you just really allow yourself, because the first thing I do is resist. Oh, I'm supposed to be resting, I'm supposed to be being, and that feels unproductive when I'm in my doing, my masculine, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't be doing that, I have this, I have that, make myself real important. And then I'm able to kind of slow that down and then sink into my beingness, into my feminine side more. When I do that, I actually start to see sparkles, and like Jennifer, what you were saying, the big light bulb moments just really start flashing off more if I'm really listening to myself and allow myself to be and stop resisting.
Mm.
So that's like that whole self-awareness piece that I think when you start to recognize what your rhythm is about and what it needs, then you can see it ahead of time and have less resistance, or know that you're going to be in resistance and just go with it, sort of be in the flow of that, so that you
Mhm.
can then relax into. That's like the biggest thing that I find with self-awareness stuff is that. And then when I can't figure it out, I usually turn to some creative process because that helps me open up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Jennifer, did you want to add anything extra?
Yeah, I just feel like part of that is about acceptance and surrender, right? And I'm thinking of Buddha sitting under that Bodhi tree and just surrendering
Yeah.
and accepting just the present moment and just sitting in that, and just this sacred, precious waiting, which I'm not so good at. I'm not good at sitting still or waiting for things. And yet I do have some practices that help me to surrender and slow down and just soften and lighten up, right? And to connect, like you say, like the lights are out if I'm not connected. I feel spaced out, or I feel so tunnel vision focused on something
Yeah.
that it's not expansive, it's not open and accepting and connected. And so yeah, I hear what you're saying, Josette, about, the masculinity and the femininity and what energy they bring and how we can bring that into a balance, into a stillness, and just be open in that creative process. I think is so inspiring. That's where we get those ideas and that opening and that surrender to the inspiration. And if we create space for that, then that's where we can act on it and then have the greatest impact, right? Instead of
Yeah.
having to try so hard. Then I'm also thinking about this light aspect, and being of the light and in the light. And then remembering that a friend shared with me her acronym for light, which I love and think it's so awesome and really speaks to enlightenment, I think, too, is living in God's highest truth.
Very
And
cool.
so, yeah, just
Love that.
kind of tuning into that, and maybe that's enlightenment also, is living in God's highest truth, or maybe our own highest truth, our own highest version of ourselves, which is light and free and joyful and peaceful and all of the things, right? That's our natural way of being. I know it is for me, my natural way of being. And so if I'm not being that, then I'm not being very enlightened. Being heavy and dark and kind of miserable, maybe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Uh-oh. She's back.
she's back.
I love it.
Sorry, did I disappear
Man.
on you?
Just for a blink of a second, just a blink of a second. When you both were talking, there were so many things that were coming to mind when I was listening to each of you. Um, but it really, what's standing out the most is this concept of balance,
Mm.
right? Balance and harmony. And I love that you brought up like energies as far as like masculine and feminine energies, and how sometimes when you're sitting like so far in the masculine energy, that feminine energy is like, come on, like beckoning you to come over and come on, come hither, baby,
Yeah.
me, right? And you're like, no, 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 I got stuff to do, right? Um, and but I want to speak to the contrast of that, right? Well, sometimes we're so into that energy of the feminine that we don't end up getting anything done either, right? And
Mhm.
so it is about kind of the harmony in
Yeah.
those two playing together, and bringing ourselves to the center of that. I know for me, just because of the way that my brain is uniquely and divinely organized, um, I've always kind of um, had a harmony of both, but it's a weird space to be in when people, the outside world expects you to be masculine,
Mhm.
right? In like the way that you do things, but then also the outside world also wants you to be emotionally connected to things as well, and that wasn't something that that comes naturally for me. Most people at this point in time would not expect either of those those
Yeah.
statements to be true because I have been able to integrate. But um, when the outside world is reflecting at you that you should be something that you're not, it does kind of cause this like angst on the inside.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
we feel like we have to be something other than what we are.
Mhm.
Right? And that can cause all kinds of havoc, right? Like that can cause all kinds of pressure and all kinds of just a tug of war that's happening within yourself that I think this very concept of enlightenment, right? This very concept of self awareness and of beingness and stillness and all the things that we've said so far in this conversation is the remedy to, right?
Yeah.
When we can reflect on what is being asked of us, but instead of trying to be what someone else's idea of that is, but being our own variation, our own version, own unique element in that space, I think that's where you can kind of marry both those masculine and feminine qualities.
Mhm.
Um, at least that's how it worked for me, right? Because I'm not outwardly vocal about emotions and my emotions. Other people's emotions are easy to recognize and to
Yeah. Way
to,
easier.
to share and to put it away. But and when I say that, I mean I have emotions. Um, I don't emote my emotions, right? So if
Mhm.
I'm feeling a certain way, then I just say what I'm feeling, but it's very much like this matter of fact conversation that we're having right
Mhm.
now. Like right now, I'm feeling overwhelmed and tired. And what is expected of me in the outside world is, "Oh, I'm so tired right now and I just can't," right? But that's not who I am. That's not how I come out in the
Yeah.
world. And so I had to learn, one, that it's okay for other people to need to express that way. And I don't need to change the fact that they're like, why is all this dramatics happening? I don't understand, right? Like you don't need to say all that. Just say what you mean. Uh, that's not it's not okay for me to push me on them and project me on them and how they should be. It's also not okay for other people to do that for me as well. There is this space of being who I am in my truth and also being able to give them what they need in order for us to collaborate or co-create an experience together. And I think in understanding yourself, right? Like when you get to understand who you are and how you work and what makes you tick and what makes you smile and what makes you angry, what makes you happy, what makes you want to dance, and what makes you want to cry, and all of those things. When you learn that about yourself and you are given the permission to just live in that truth, I think a lot of the times what happens is you can come into these experiences and creating relationships and being authentically who you are. And it does allow for this connectivity without having to have that tug of war of push and pull,
Mhm.
who you
Mhm.
are and what the outside world wants you to be.
Mm. I
Yeah.
love so many things that you've said. There's just like so much. Like when you first started talking about like how you basically laid out the transition of how we end up wearing a mask, right? Because we have these expectations that are put on us and we're expected to be. I was watching, it just reminded me, I was watching halftime of J-Lo when she did the halftime
Yeah.
show, looking at her and she's standing like up on a, I don't know, a platform and her knee was up. And I was like thinking, wow, she's standing in a really masculine stance, yet she's expected to be feminine, yet she has to be masculine enough for her to do what she does and keep that momentum going. And
Yeah.
it made me really think about the expectations that we have as women and
Yes.
what we expect of each other, what men expect of us, what the world expects of us, society, how that looks, what that looks like, and what's that have to do with enlightenment? I'm not really sure yet, but it just was really interesting what you were saying, and it reminded me of all those things, because I think we don't really, and maybe this is what it has to do with it, because I think as women we don't necessarily analyze that very much, and I think that we don't really recognize where we're being, maybe more in our doing and masculine energy, and I think we spend a lot more time there than we want to admit. I
Mhm.
know I have,
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. Even in our nurturing, I think,
Hmm.
raising kids and all
Yeah,
that stuff, we end up having to be in that masculine space a bit more than we want to,
right, especially when you're a single parent.
especially when
Mhm.
you're a single parent.
Yeah.
So we are rounding the bases here as our conversation. I mean, we could literally keep talking about this. Josette, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Can you give us what is one way that someone can bring forward enlightenment in their spiritual practice?
Hmm. I think that the tool that I found that works the best for me and has worked for my clients is when they all get to a place where they get kind of stumped. You get a little stuck. It's sort of like the river going down, flowing, and it hits the rocks. You're either going to bubble up, bubble around, or eventually it just sort of finds its way. It wiggles the rocks and goes through. So whatever that is, putting a creative practice in place
Mm.
allows you to kind of like get out of your head, get into your intuition, into your body, and express yourself on a soul level. And when you can do that, then your art speaks to you. So your awareness rises through that creative process. And that's the biggest thing that I have found that works for me and works for my clients. And it's done in ease. So there's no like pushing, trying to like, you don't have to beat a pillow, although it serves its purpose. Yet this is a way that you can consistently find your answers within yourself,
Yeah,
um, and tap in.
love that. Love that. Jennifer, what about you? What do you think is one kind of thing that someone can pull enlightenment into their spiritual practice?
Yeah. You know what? When I'm hearing this conversation, I'm thinking about self actualization, self realization, because I heard a lot of that from both of you. And so I think that's part of the journey is that moving up onto that self actualization and self realization, realizing who we truly are. And so the practice that I think that might be useful is that maybe journaling about or thinking about, contemplating on who you are when you're by yourself. Who are you when you're by yourself?
Yeah,
And really discover who that is, and realize that that's you. That's the real you. You know?
yeah.
What about you, Monica?
I have six simple questions that I think everyone should ask themselves every day. And I know six sounds like a lot, but they're very simple because they're correlated to each other.
Hmm.
The first question is, how would I describe myself mentally? Right?
Mm.
You can even put it today on there if you want to do this daily, right? How do I describe myself mentally today? And then what am I experiencing mentally? What am I experiencing? Right? And then you ask yourself the same two questions for your physicality. What am I? How would I describe myself physically today? And what am I experiencing physically? And then ask yourself, what am I? How would I describe myself spiritually today? And then what am I experiencing emotionally? And then if you can answer those questions about yourself on a daily basis, that path to self enlightenment, I think, is going to be substantially easier because it's giving you a moment to check in with all three essences that create who you are.
Mm.
Whoa,
Woo!
Good.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
so much fun. This has
Yes.
been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Josette, for joining us for Getting Real with the Spiritual.
Yeah, thank you for having me. That was a lot of fun.
It was. It really was.
How can people get in touch with you?
You can reach me through my website, which is guidancedwellness.com. That's like the easiest way to reach out to me. And I have a couple of freebies going on. So that's through my Instagram is Guidance to Wellness. So that's pretty easy. I try to keep it simple. I'm on LinkedIn as well. And there's too many Josette Diaz's out there. So I'm Josette Diaz at LinkedIn. And those are the easiest ways to reach me. And I have like a free chat and all kinds of good stuff.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So, Jennifer, is there anything else you want to add before we close?
No, yeah, it was fun. I enjoy this. It's always so much fun. I'd love to hear what people's thoughts are, though, about what they think about enlightenment or what their takeaways were. So I'd love to see that in the comments.
Yeah, I'd love to see that too. So definitely drop a comment. And if you are enjoying this conversation, we will be bringing them to you on a regular basis. Also, if you would like to join us, we are putting together a meetup where we can, after we've gotten real with the podcast, we are going to keep it real with the meetup where we can talk about what we've tried, what we've experienced, what's worked for us, maybe exchange ideas so that you can continue to grow in your spirituality, in your spiritual practice, and you can keep getting real. So, with that, we will see you all next time on Getting Real with the Spiritual. Bye.
Bye.